The Night King never spoke a single word throughout the entire series. He never explained who he had once been, why he returned when he did, or what he intended to achieve after his victory. He simply marched south, raised the dead, and turned every human defeat into fresh recruits for his own army. That silence made him one of the most frightening figures in Game of Thrones, but it also left countless questions unanswered after the finale. Why did the Children of the Forest choose that particular man for their ritual? Did he retain any memories of his former life? Why did he leave spiral symbols behind? Why did he personally hunt Bran? Where did the army of the dead suddenly get enormous chains at exactly the moment a dragon fell into an icy lake? And did the Night King truly want nothing more than to destroy all living things? The series answered only some of those questions. Viewers tried to explain the rest themselves. That gave rise to dozens of theories, ranging from logical extensions of what the show actually presented to elaborate ideas involving time travel. The finale all but destroyed some of them, while others still fill the gaps better than the official explanation ever did. But first, one distinction has to be made. The TV series and the books are not the same. The Night King from the adaptation and the Night's King from George Martin's novels should not be treated as the same character. In the series, the Night King is the leader of the White Walkers, created by the Children of the Forest. During their war with the First Men, they tied a captive to a weirwood tree and drove a shard of dragonglass into his chest. The creature that emerged was meant to be a weapon against mankind, but eventually his army turned against its creators as well. In the books, there is currently no known leader of the others who corresponds to the show's Night King. There is, however, an ancient legend about the Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He fell in love with a woman with white skin and blue eyes, declared her his queen, and ruled from the Night Fort for 13 years. He was overthrown by Brandon the Breaker, King of Winter, and Joramun, the King Beyond the Wall, and his name was erased from history. Martin has compared this figure to the half-legendary heroes of the distant past, rather than to an immortal being who necessarily survived into the events of the main saga. Theory 1. Bran Stark is the Night King. The similarity between the names encouraged fans to merge two very different stories. That is how the most famous theory was born. Bran Stark is the Night King. According to the expanded version of this theory, Bran did more than simply observe the past. He tried to change it and stop the White Walkers before the Long Night ever began. First, he supposedly entered the mind of Brandon the Builder and helped construct the wall. Then he tried to warn the Mad King about the army of the dead, but only made his madness worse, twisting the warning into the command to burn them all. His final attempt ended in disaster. Bran entered the man whom the Children of the Forest were turning into the First Walker, failed to return, and became trapped in that body forever. It sounds unbelievable, but the series really did establish that Bran can affect the past. Young Ned Stark seems to hear him at the Tower of Joy. Even more important is what happened to Hodor. Bran was inside a vision of the past, while simultaneously controlling adult Hodor in the present, connecting two different moments in time. Willis heard the command to hold the door, suffered a devastating seizure, and remained Hodor for the rest of his life. After that scene, Bran's journeys through the past no longer looked like harmless recordings he could simply watch. His actions could become part of events that had happened many years earlier. That is why the idea of another time loop no longer seemed completely absurd. Supporters of the theory pointed to other parallels as well. Bran and the Night King are both connected to weirwoods, both can control other bodies, and both show very little emotion. The Night King can see Bran inside a vision and leave a real mark on him, one that continues to exist in the physical world. There is clearly a connection between them, unlike anything shared by ordinary enemies. But Hodor's story demonstrates a closed loop, not a rewriting of the past. Bran does not change what has already happened. His intervention was always part of Willis's fate. For the theory to work, Bran would have had to be the captive at the weirwood from the very beginning. The series could have taken him into that paradox, but it never did. After the Night King's death, Bran remains alive and eventually becomes king of the Six Kingdoms. Viewers were given no confirmation that he had ever transferred himself into an ancient man. The finale did not confirm the theory and effectively closed the door on it, but the idea itself offered a powerful tragedy. Bran, while trying to prevent the end of the world, creates the very enemy he is fighting. The past cannot be changed because every attempt to change it is already part of history. In that version of the story, the Night King would not be some alien monster, but the consequence of a mistake made by the person who wanted to save the world. Theory 2. The Night King was an ancient Stark. The second theory argues that the captive was not Bran, but another member of House Stark. Its foundation comes from Old Nan's story about the Night's King from the books. According to one version of the legend, he came from Winterfell, was the brother of the king in the north, and may even have been named Brandon. Since the Stark family has had many Brandons throughout its history, fans tried to connect the Night's King to Brandon the Builder, the founder of the house and the legendary creator of Winterfell and the Wall. That created a striking mirror image. The man who built the defense against the darkness becomes the source of that darkness himself. The Wall would then be more than just a fortress. It could be an attempt to correct an ancient mistake or imprison a cursed Stark in the far north. A more cautious version does not identify any particular Brandon. It simply suggests that the Children of the Forest transformed an unknown Stark ancestor during the war with the First Men. That could explain the family's unusual connection to northern magic. Ned's children are capable of entering the minds of their direwolves, while Bran becomes one of the most powerful greenseers. Perhaps something remained in the Stark bloodline that made that ancient captive especially suitable for the ritual. In that case, the army of the dead marching on Winterfell becomes a form of family reckoning. The descendants are forced to destroy the creature one of their ancestors became thousands of years earlier. It is especially symbolic that Arya Stark delivers the final blow while Bran Stark serves as the bait. The main problem is that the theory mixes together different eras. The show's Night King was created during the war between the Children of the Forest and the First Men. The Night's King from the books was a Lord Commander who lived after the Wall, and the Night's Watch already existed. Brandon the Builder, the legendary Night's King, and the captive from the series do not have to be the same person. The finale never confirmed that the Night King came from House Stark, but the captive's name and family were never revealed either. So the theory remains unproven, though it cannot be ruled out completely. Theory 3. The Night King was a greenseer. The third theory attempts to explain the Night King's unusual abilities. Before his transformation, he may have been a greenseer, or perhaps an ancient predecessor of the three-eyed raven. The Night King can do things that no other White Walker is shown doing. He senses Bran inside a vision, touches him, and leaves a mark. That mark breaks the protection around the cave, allowing the dead to enter. The Night King also controls an enormous army of reanimated corpses. This resembles an extremely amplified form of warging, a single will using countless other bodies as extensions of itself. Perhaps the Children of the Forest did not choose a random warrior at all, but a man with a rare gift. They wanted a weapon that could locate enemies, see what they were doing, and command the dead. The Dragonglass may have amplified the captive's abilities while destroying or distorting his personality. This version also explains why the Night King specifically hunts the three-eyed ravens. Bran says that attempts like this have happened before. That would mean this is not a personal conflict between two individuals, but a war that has continued across many generations. One side preserves the memory of the living through weirwoods and visions. The other erases individual identity and turns bodies into silent soldiers. Bran can see the lives of the dead while preserving their stories. The Night King brings the dead back, but strips away their past. They become two opposite responses to death, memory and oblivion. There is no direct proof. The captive in the creation scene shows no visible signs of being a greenseer, and control over the whites may belong to an entirely different kind of magic. Even so, the theory offers a strong explanation for why the Night King can enter Bran's visions, and why destroying the three-eyed raven appears more important to him than killing any king or queen. Theory 4. The Night King knew the dragons were coming. The fourth theory emerged after Jon's expedition beyond the Wall. According to it, the Night King could see the future and deliberately lured Daenerys north so that he could obtain a dragon. Jon's group becomes trapped on a small island in the middle of a frozen lake. The dead do not attack again until the ice becomes solid enough to cross. During that time, Gendry manages to reach the wall, and a raven makes it all the way to Dragonstone. Then Daenerys arrives with all 3 dragons. The Night King throws an ice spear, kills Viserion, and after the survivors escape, he pulls the dragon's body from the lake using enormous chains. The reanimated dragon destroys the wall, the greatest obstacle standing in the army's path. The sequence is almost too convenient, and that raised obvious questions. Why did the dead already have chains large enough for a dragon? Why did the Night King wait so calmly? Why did he throw the spear at Viserion in flight instead of Drogon, who was sitting much closer to him? Was the entire situation a trap? According to this theory, his connection to Bran allowed the Night King to glimpse possible futures or somehow spy on his enemies' visions. He knew Jon would end up in danger, that Daenerys would fly north to save him, and that one of the dragons would become vulnerable. Capturing a White was not a clever plan devised by the living, but part of the dead's strategy from the beginning. The strongest objection is obvious. If the Night King could see the future that well, why did he not foresee Arya's attack? Supporters of the theory argue that his visions may have been incomplete. He might have been able to see major events without seeing every individual action, or he may have mistaken what he saw for something inevitable. But the series never confirms that he possesses any form of foresight. He may simply have taken advantage of an unexpected opportunity, while the chains remain an unexplained convenience of the episode. Even so, the trap theory makes the sequence of events feel more coherent. The Night King obtains the one weapon capable of destroying the wall quickly at exactly the moment he needs it. If it was coincidence, he was extraordinarily lucky. If it was a plan, then he becomes not only an embodiment of death, but a patient strategist. Theory 5. The Night King wanted revenge on the children of the forest. The fifth theory gives him a more human motivation. The Night King was taking revenge on the children of the forest. Before the ritual, he was a man. He was captured, tied to a weirwood, and forcibly transformed into a weapon. Even if almost nothing of his former identity remained, the memory of that pain may have survived. In that case, the War of the White Walkers becomes a rebellion of the creation against its creators. This would explain the attack on the Three-Eyed Raven's cave. The last known children of the forest were there, along with the Keeper of the Magic tied to their people. The Night King personally entered the cave, killed the old raven, and his army destroyed the remnants of the race that had created the walkers in the first place. The spiral symbols are especially important. A similar pattern surrounded the weirwood at the place where the Night King was created. Later, the White Walkers arranged human and animal bodies into similar shapes. Writer Dave Hill explained that the spiral was a sacred symbol of the children of the forest, which the Night King appropriated as an act of blasphemy. In other words, he turned the symbol of his creators into a threat of his own. But the army did not stop after the children of the forest were killed. Revenge alone, therefore, cannot explain everything. Bran may have become the new bearer of their memory and the last heir to weirwood magic. Yet Bran describes a broader goal. The Night King wants an endless night and seeks to erase the world, while the Three-Eyed Raven represents its memory. These explanations can be combined. The children of the forest created a weapon against mankind and built into it the purpose of destroying the enemy. When the pact ended the war, the weapon could no longer be stopped. It broke free of its creators and eventually turned on everyone. In that interpretation, the Night King is both victim and monster. He was stripped of choice, turned into a mechanism of war, and then that mechanism continued following its command without limits. Theory 6. The White Walkers were restoring balance. The sixth theory argues that the White Walkers did not seek the total destruction of humanity, but rather the restoration of a balance that had been broken. The first men and the children of the forest once made the pact. Humans received the open lands while the forests remained with the ancient race. Later, the Andals cut down the weirwoods and nearly wiped out the children of the forest. The White Walkers may have been nature's final defense mechanism, awakening when humanity violated the terms of that ancient peace. In this version, the return of the Long Winter is connected to the return of the dragons. After magic fades from the world, Daenerys' dragons are born. Bran's abilities grow stronger, and the Walkers return as well. Fire produces an answer in ice. A Song of Ice and Fire becomes not the title of a battle between good and evil, but a warning. Neither of the two forces should ever gain absolute power. Fans speculated that Jon was not supposed to kill the Night King at all, but to make a new pact with him. Perhaps it would require a sacrifice, the return of certain lands, or a willing guardian to stand between the living and the dead. Some versions gave that role to Jon himself. He would have to take the Night King's place and lead the army back into the far north. That kind of ending seemed fitting for a world where enemies are often more complicated than people are first told. The wildlings initially appeared to be savages, but turned out to be ordinary people fleeing death. The children of the forest seemed like innocent victims until it was revealed that they had created the White Walkers. Many viewers expected the dead to have an understandable reason as well. The series chose a different path. The Night King never offers negotiations and never demands that an ancient agreement be honored. The creators compared him not to an ordinary villain, but to death itself, a force that needs neither justification nor words. But for the books, the balance theory remains interesting. Martin's others have their own language, armor, and culture, and there is still no single Night King ruling them. The novels may ultimately lead not to the destruction of one central enemy in a single blow, but to the discovery of an ancient pact or a forgotten price that humanity stopped paying. Theory 7. Craster's sons became White Walkers. The seventh theory concerns Craster's sons and the structure of the army of the dead. For years, Craster gave his newborn sons to the White Walkers. Later, viewers saw one of them carry an infant to an icy altar. The Night King touches the baby's face, and the child's eyes turn blue. This is not the same as raising an ordinary white. The dead return without wills of their own and act like puppets. Craster's infant, by contrast, begins transforming into a White Walker, a member of a species capable of using weapons, riding horses, and commanding the dead. That led to the theory that the silent walkers standing beside the Night King were Craster's grown sons. For decades, he had effectively been producing officers for a future war. The Whites were disposable soldiers, while the Walkers formed a higher rank, each commanding a portion of the dead. A darker version suggests that one of those children was being raised as a successor. The Night King may not have been a single eternal ruler, but merely the current bearer of a power that could eventually be inherited by another Walker. The finale weakens this idea. When the Night King dies, the other White Walkers shatter, and all the Whites at Winterfell collapse. This shows that the army he created is directly tied to his existence. But the series never explains how quickly the transformed children grow, whether they retain consciousness, or why Craster specifically had to sacrifice sons rather than daughters. The scene remains one of the biggest unresolved mysteries in the story. It shows that the Night King did more than raise the dead. He could also create new White Walkers. That means his plans may have been designed to unfold over generations. Theory 8. The Night King served the Great Other. The eighth theory connects the Night King to the religion of R'hllor. He may have been the earthly incarnation, or perhaps the greatest servant of the Great Other, the force associated with darkness, cold, and death. The priests of the Lord of Light believe in a struggle between two opposing powers. R'hllor is associated with fire and life, while his enemy is linked to night and death. Azor Ahai is meant to return, wake dragons from stone, and stop the darkness. The Night King fits the role of that dark power's champion almost perfectly. He brings cold, commands the dead, and advances with winter itself. His enemies fight him with fire, dragonglass, and Valyrian steel. Daenerys brings dragons back into the world, Jon returns from death through the magic of R'hllor, and Melisandre arrives at Winterfell just before the final battle. That is why many viewers expected Jon or Daenerys to be revealed as Azor Ahai and personally defeat the Night King. Perhaps that victory would require forging a new Lightbringer and sacrificing someone they loved. Instead, Arya delivers the final blow with a Valyrian steel dagger, without literally reenacting the ancient legend. That can be seen as a contradiction of the prophecy, but prophecies in Martin's world rarely come true in the way the characters expect. Melisandre repeatedly makes mistakes while trying to identify a single chosen savior. Perhaps the promised hero was not one person at all, but a chain of people. Jon united the living, Daenerys brought the dragons, Bran became the bait, and Arya finished the fight. There is also a reverse version of the theory. The Great Other did not control the Night King. Instead, memories of the First Walker and the Long Night eventually evolved into a religion centered on a dark god. A historical monster became the mythological enemy of the light. The series barely explores the Great Other, so the connection cannot be confirmed. But the theory gives the conflict a cosmic scale. The Night King becomes more than a mistake made by the children of the forest. He becomes part of an ancient struggle between ice and fire. Theory 9. The three-eyed raven was the real villain. The ninth theory completely changes how the ending can be interpreted. According to it, the true villain was the three-eyed raven, and the Night King was trying to stop him. After his training in the cave, Bran changes. He barely shows emotion, says that he is no longer Brandon Stark, knows the secrets of the past, and may be able to glimpse parts of the future. Yet he rarely tells other people what he knows. His rise to power is especially suspicious. When the council chooses Bran as king, he asks why they think he came all that way. The line can be understood as simple willingness to accept responsibility, but supporters of the theory hear something closer to a confession. He knew the outcome in advance and allowed events to carry him to the throne. If Bran could see the future, why did he not warn anyone about Euron's ambush? Why did he not try to prevent the destruction of King's Landing? Why did he not explain what the revelation of Jon's parentage would lead to? And what exactly was he doing through the Ravens during the Battle of Winterfell? The most radical version argues that Bran's personality disappeared entirely, and that the three-eyed raven is an ancient consciousness that moves from one host body to another. The old man trained the boy not to save the world, but to obtain a young body capable of leaving the cave. The raven then helped humanity destroy the only being capable of reaching him, and eventually took the throne for himself. In this interpretation, the Night King was not hunting the memory of humanity. He was hunting the dangerous entity inside Bran. The mark allowed him to track it. The attack on the cave was an attempt to end an ancient war, and the meeting in the Godswood became a confrontation between two enemies who had known one another for thousands of years. That does not turn the Night King into a hero. He destroys everyone in his path and is willing to annihilate humanity to achieve his goal. The theory has an even bigger problem. The series directly states that Bran represents the memory of the world, which the Night King wants to erase. There is no evidence that the Raven transfers between bodies, deliberately engineers wars, or controls Daenerys. Even so, the suspicion is understandable. Bran becomes the most powerful and least understandable ruler in Westeros. He gains the throne after a chain of tragedies that he may have been able to foresee. That makes it easy to reinterpret the ending as the victory not of the Stark boy, but of an ancient intelligence that had been patiently waiting for the right moment. Theory 10. A new night. King could rise again. The 10th theory argues that the Night King is not a unique individual, but a role that could one day return. The White Walkers were created through a ritual. That means that, if the necessary knowledge still exists, the ritual could theoretically be repeated. Another captive, another weirwood, and another shard of dragonglass might be enough to create a new Night King. Some fans believed that Jon Snow was meant to take on that role. He had already died and returned. He was deeply connected to the North, and he embodied both ice and fire. To save the world, Jon might willingly have accepted the curse and led the dead back beyond the wall. Others pointed to Bran. The mark on his arm might have been more than a beacon. Perhaps it was also a fragment of the Night King's magic. After the first bearer died, the power was supposedly meant to pass to the marked person. In that case, Bran's election as king would have marked the beginning of a new and even more dangerous era. A third group hoped that one of Craster's sons had survived somewhere. If not every White Walker had been directly created by the fallen Night King, then one independent line might have survived the battle. The series gives no real basis for such a continuation. When the Night King dies, the Walkers and Whites connected to him die as well, and neither Jon nor Bran shows any sign of transformation. But the idea of a repeating cycle fits the history of Westeros. The first long night became a fairy tale. The Night's Watch weakened, people forgot the danger, and once again turned to fighting among themselves. They defeated the dead, but they never eliminated the reason the dead had been created in the first place. The children of the forest created the Night King out of fear and desperation. As long as intelligent beings are willing to turn prisoners into weapons, the same kind of story can happen again. A new Night King would not necessarily have to be an icy creature. It could be any ruler who erases the individuality of others in the name of victory and sees people only as material for an army. So who was the Night King really? The canon of the television series gives a simple answer. He was a captive from among the first men whom the children of the forest forcibly transformed into a weapon. Eventually, that weapon turned against its creators, built an army, and tried to bring a new long night to the world. According to Bran, the Night King hunted the three-eyed raven because destroying the world's memory would complete the destruction of humanity itself. Arya Stark killed him with a Valyrian steel dagger, and the army he had created collapsed with him. But that answer still leaves major gaps. We do not know the captive's name, and we do not know whether any part of his human memory survived. It is unclear why he returned during this particular era, or what the exact nature of his connection to Bran was. We do not know whether he could see the future, what truly happened to Craster's sons, or why the dead kept repeating the symbol of the children of the forest. That is why the theories continue to survive. The Bran theory creates a tragic time loop. The ancient Stark theory turns the war into a family curse. The Seer theory explains the connection between the two enemies. The Viserion trap turns the Night King into a strategist. Revenge against the children of the forest restores a human motive. The balance between ice and fire transforms the invasion into the world's own response to imbalance. The Great Other connects him to prophecy, and the three-eyed raven theory forces us to ask whether the living truly won in the end. Perhaps the creators deliberately chose not to give the Night King a voice. The moment a monster explains itself, it becomes easier to understand, and therefore less frightening. As long as he remains silent, viewers can see him as death, revenge, nature, a forgotten Stark, Bran's mistake, or an ancient enemy who knows the truth about the future king. But that silence is also the character's weakness. A mystery works only as long as the audience believes an answer exists. When the story ends and no answer ever comes, mystery begins to feel like something left unfinished. The Night King died without revealing his name, his past, or his full plan. That is why his complete story exists not only on the screen, but also in the spaces between scenes, in the theories created by viewers. The people of Westeros forgot the first long night and turned it into legend. Viewers witnessed the second one and immediately began creating new legends of their own. As long as people continue debating who the Night King really was, he remains more than just a defeated villain. He remains one of the greatest mysteries in the entire world of Game of Thrones,